And I also created another community called 3D Art, which again, you can stream to if you are doing more arty type things in 3D. So you'll either find me now in the 3D modeling community or 3D Art, but usually 3D modeling probably. I'm just going to deselect that for a minute and have a look. Alright. It's, don't do this. Where am I? Max Autodesk moved some of the tools around because they revamped this interface. I'm just looking. There's an option here that'll allow me to just select part of the UVs that I want. You do that through these IDs here. Because I was having trouble selecting that because it was laying on top of this UV island, that allows me to select it, then I can go back to all. And I have it selected so I can move it. Because it's actually, this UV island here is sitting on top of that one, so it made selecting that one difficult. So you can do it through your IDs here in Mac, in the Unwrap UVW. I think we need to scale it up a bit more, and I don't know if we're going to be able to use that part of the texture. It looks like it may be not going to work properly for us, but we'll see. I'm going to move it over to the edge. And pull it down a little bit as well. Again, I'm holding down the shift key to constrain it in one direction. I'm not deselecting it, I'm just turning off the polygon here so I can see what the texture is doing. And now I can see also that it looks like it needs to be flipped. I'm going to flip it in the horizontal. We're still not going to get a proper line up here. So instead of us trying to carry that texture around to the edge, we're going to have to use a different part of the texture. That's okay, we can do that. Let's try pulling it out just a bit more over here. I think that'll work better for us. Just using a plain part of the wood. And we still managed to avoid overlapping on our second piece of the UV island there. Let's do the same for the other side. We're going to rotate it around and move it down. We're going to scale it up as well. Again, I'm scaling only in one direction, not in all directions, because otherwise I'm going to get my UVs stretching. Just move it over to the other side here. It looks like I need to scale it down just a little bit. Remember, the closer to the object you are while you're doing the scale, the more control you're going to have over the scale. The further away you are, the less control. So if you need to do fine scaling adjustments, zoom in on that piece of geometry. That should hold true for whatever 3D program you're using, I would imagine, not just Max. And that goes for movement as well as scaling. Anything, the closer you get to the UVs, the more control you'll have over it. It works that way also for Mari. Just going to pull that in a bit. Again, we're avoiding doing any overlapping here, which is good. Just rotate our model around. Okay, that's looking okay. Let's do these top edges now. We're going to cheapen the top edges, and again, this is a good example of using another part of the texture. Not feeling like you have to use any part of the texture right near where the object is that you're texturing up. There's a couple of places here. We could use here, these pieces here, or we can use these pieces here. Let's try these ones down here first. So again, I'm just going to move that down to the bottom. Now I'm going to scale it. I'm scaling on all directions at the same time here because I don't want to make it too stretched. Now I'm going to scale it in just a little. Move that there. And that's fine. You see what I mean by using a different part of the texture? You don't know when you're looking at it. So, and because we want to try and avoid any overlaps, and we don't have a lot of room left here, using the texture down here is going to be fine. So let's do that for this one as well, which is the bottom edge of that border. So I'm going to start by doing a uniform scale and then scale it in one direction only. And like I said, I want to avoid doing, by all means you could put one over the other and texture it up like that. But if you take it into Mari like that, you're going to have problems when you're doing texture painting. So, because like I said, I'm not sure if I actually do want to do any painting in Mari, I'm going to avoid doing that just in case. We've got plenty of texture to work with here, so that's not a big deal. And that's our bottom edge. Again, I'm going to go into Photoshop to get rid of those holes here in the middle, because I don't want holes in there anyway. In fact, we may do that right now in case I forget. So I'm just going to see what that texture is called here. Deco building, Deco model, panel wood new.tga. Okay. Just going to jump into Photoshop really quickly. I always forget my coffees here. I always end up going cold. The Sniper Echo knows. He knows that I take my break. I'll be going on a break for a couple of minutes soon just to make a fresh one because it is cold. Let's open up that texture we were just pardon me, working with in Max. UE4 projects, models, Art Deco building, Deco model. What was it called again? It was called wall something, wasn't it? Wall, wall light, wall panel, maybe this one here. No, not that one. Just a sec, guys. My memory. I can't remember what the bloody thing was called. Come on, Max. Panel wood new. Okay, I never would have got it. Panel wood new. Right there. Oops, and let me just change this so I can see chat. There we go. Sniper actually, he does the same thing. Good, I'm glad I'm not the only one. You're starting to get used to cold coffee, yeah. I can drink a cold coffee, that's not a problem. I prefer not to though. I always like that. A warmer coffee is always nice. I can put up with it being cold until, you know, until midday when I'll take a break for a couple of minutes and make a fresh one, but it's nearly gone anyway because this cup is pretty small. So. And you guys know I live on coffee. It's what keeps me going, so I need coffee. I'm just going to select part of the texture here that's just near where that hole is that I want to remove. There's a couple of ways you could do this. You could actually use the spot healing tool in Photoshop. You don't have as much control, so I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to copy and paste that panel piece in. I'm going to grab my eraser tool here. I've got a soft edge brush. I'm going to make it quite large. I'm going to feather out the edges of that piece we just copied in. Pasted in, I should say. I'm going to turn it off. Okay.
I never was one for forgiveness. I always try to pull my weight. They say the other side is greener. I'm pretty sure I won't be late.
Now, I also want to just feather out that edge there, but I don't want to use a really large brush, so I'm going to have to reduce the size of my brush here. And in fact, I may even go to the pen and use the Wacom tablet, just to get a bit more control.
I've traveled through this world a million times before, and every path I cross I know what lies in store. And even though I know my heart is on repeat, life has always been bittersweet.
Just a little bit on this side here. There we go. And that just covers that up. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. That piece of wood is in a darker section of the wood, so I'm going to grab a piece from down here. Make sure I'm on the right layer. You see the problem we're having here with the difference in the colour of the wood. Let's try blending it in first with using the eraser tool. Again with the pen. Reduce my brush size just a little bit. And now I may also, even though that's not too bad, I may just do a little bit of color correction on it through, let's try using the levels first. No, just Control L to hit your levels command there in Photoshop. It's going to pull it up just a little bit to make it blend in a little bit better. Like that. That should be good for what we need, I think. Yep. I'm just going to merge all of my layers down now and save that file out again. Let's jump back into Max. And now we've gotten rid of those holes that were appearing here that were just in the original texture and we never wanted anyway. So let's move our new frame over the panel. And we'll do that in the front viewport here so we don't accidentally move it in a direction we don't want. Again, it's not letting me select it because we're in our unwrap here and we've got something selected. I make this mistake all the time. If you're a Max user and FS Vault, you may run into this problem. If you have either your verts or your polys selected for your UVs and you try and move anything, you're not going to be able to, and you're going to be wondering why. It's just because you've got something selected. So deselect it and then you'll be able to move it. And like I said, it's an easy mistake to make, and it's one that I make all the time in Max. Just forgetting I have one of my poly or verts selected in my unwrap. So now we have more three-dimensionality to the top of that panel. Let's go this way, it'll be easier. The shadowing's making it hard to see what's going on. So again, like I said, that just gives it more three-dimensionality when we start sweeping through doing a cinematic in Unreal. But let's not stop there, let's keep going, because there's other parts here that we can add a bit more interest to, and for instance these smaller frames here at the bottom. Now by all means I could create another box here and cut it out like we did for this, but we've already got something selected here already made, so let's use that to save ourselves some time. So I'm just going to select that and copy it down here. So I'm holding down the shift key while I do that and make a copy, not an instance. Let's scale it in all X, Y and Z directions here, because we don't want it to be as thick as the top piece either. Now we can start scaling it down in the Y. Now again, we're not worrying about the texture, we're going to change the texture. We're just trying to get it to the same size as that frame there. Let's move it in. Actually, let me move it down so I can judge the width here as well. And the width looks pretty good too, but it's too thick, so we're going to have to fix that in just a minute. Just before we start altering the geometry on this piece of mesh though, I am going to take a quick break now and grab a fresh coffee, a hot coffee. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes, guys. I'll leave you with my be right back screen. So I'll only be a few minutes while I grab a fresh cup of coffee, and I will be right back. Okay. Yes, by all means, Sniper Echo says I use a lot of different software packages, FS Bolt. So by all means do follow my Twitch channel if you like, and watch me while I stream, because I do use a lot of different software. So like I said, or for anyone watching that for that matter, if you're not a Max user, that's not a big deal, because I use Substance, I use Maya, I use Vue, whatever the project is I'm working on at the time. Let's get this piece of geometry fixed though. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to position it about where it needs to be, over the old frame there in the background, and I can see it needs to be a little bit wider. So again, I'm just going to scale it out in the X direction here in Max. Just a little bit. Now our frame here is too thick compared to the one that we're trying to copy underneath, so we already have our unwrap UVW in here. I'm just going to turn that off briefly and jump back to our edit poly here. Go into my vertex mode. I've already got those inner edges selected, so I'm just going to pull that up until I see the underlying texture I'm trying to mimic. I'll do the same thing down the bottom here. Now remember, I'm in the front viewport. Trying to do this in the orthographic viewport is going to be difficult because you may miss a vert, so doing it in the front is probably best. Also make sure you don't have ignore backfacing turned on. Otherwise you're only going to select the verts that the viewport that you see in the viewport, not the ones on the back. We'll pull that down. And now let's do the ones on the side. So I'm going to select all those. Hold down the control key and select all of those. And pull it over until we see the underlying frame in the background. We'll do the same on this side. Hold down control key. Alright, so now we have our frame sized correctly for the one that we're mimicking in the background. Now we can jump back up to the unwrap, turn it back on, open it up. This is just a quirk of Mac's. Every time you copy a UV unwrap, it always defaults to being really small like that, the viewport. I'm going to make it a bit bigger. Turn on our texture in the background. Now, this is one of the advantages of copying the geometry as opposed to remaking it. We've already got our UVs here, so more or less positioned the way we want them. So it's going to be less work for us to have to move things around. Make sure you've got all objects turned on if you want to select the whole thing. I had that switched off. When we're switching it off, you can select individual UV pieces, but I don't want that. I want the whole thing, so I turn that on. And I'm just going to move that down here. I'm also just going to move... I was going to move those two pieces out, but we'll leave them there. We'll see if we can work around them. I'm going to scale this down. Until the height matches the height of the piece that we're trying to copy the texturing for. Again, I'm just uniformly scaling at this stage. Scale it up, again uniform at the moment. I'm not holding down the shift key at all. Just until we match the height here. Now I'm going to move that into position over the texture that we want to copy, that we want to UV map. Now I'm going to hold down the shift key and scale in just the one direction here. Okay, so that's looking okay, but you'll see that our UVs now, because it was UV'd for the larger piece, isn't fitting quite correctly through the middle. So if we go into vertex mode, again, now this is where you want to turn this off, because if you don't, you're going to select all the verts. So you turn off that whole object selection. I'm going to do the same thing I did when I sized it. I'm going to hold down the control key and select the verts on the inside edge. And move them over. I'm going to do the same thing on this side. So again, hold down the control key and move them over. And again, I'm holding down the shift key while I do this so that I don't accidentally move it up and down. I'm only moving it in one direction. And let's just adjust the ones on the top a little bit as well. Control key to hold both, shift key to constrain. And the ones on the bottom, they're not too bad. We may move them down just a little bit. Alright. Again, I'm going to turn off in my unwrap UVW map and peel seam so I can see the texture much more easily here. Now let's just, we're in our front viewport. I'm going to jump into our orthographic. So I want to check the color of the texture on the inside. It should be okay. And that saves us a lot of time having to retexture just by copying that piece of geometry put it down the bottom here. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to copy that one across. Again, you notice I can't move it. That's because I have my vert selected in my unwrap. Turn that off. Hold down the shift key and drag a copy over. Make sure it's a copy, not an instance. Don't instance it, because if you change anything here, it's going to change it here. And you'll notice that this piece of geometry here is a little bit small for the underlying texture, so we're just going to scale it up in the X direction. Needs to come up just a little bit more. Again, the closer you get, the more control you'll have. That should be good. Now, to better match the texture that's underneath of that, because it's slightly different to this one color-wise. Again, it's copied our unwrap UVW, so I'm going to open our UVW editor. Again, because we copied it, Max has this bug where it makes the view here very small. Just to make it a bit bigger. And instead of copying that texture now, we're going to move it over and copy this one. So again, I'm going to make sure that I have whole object selected here. And I'm going to move that over. Again, I'm holding down the shift key to constrain it in one direction. And again, you'll see that this piece of geometry is just a little bit bigger, so I'm going to have to scale it up just a little. Like that. I'm going to turn my selection off, and again I'm going to turn off map seams and peel seams. So now we have two pieces of geometry, but we just moved the texture map position, the UV position over, so we're using a slightly different texture. It makes it look more unique that way. We could have left the same UV mapping here, but because we have a texture that's different and it's no big deal for us just to move the UVs over, we're better off doing that to make the piece of geometry look more interesting. Let's see here, what else can we play with? So we have our large frame here, our two smaller frames here and here. Let's do these frames here along the bottom. And we're going to do the same thing again. Why reinvent everything when we've already got the geometry created? So I'm going to select that frame, hold down the shift key and drag a copy down. We're going to scale it again to make sure it fits the piece of geometry that we're working with, that we want to copy in the background. We'll scale it up just a little bit. Scale it out just a little bit. You see, I move it out of the way so I can get a better view of the background, the piece of geometry we're copying in the background there. Scale it up just a little bit more. I'm going to pull it down so I can see whether my alignment is correct on the sides here, as far as size goes. It looks like we might be able to go up just a little bit more. And that should be good. And again, I'm going to move it up and move it off so I can make sure the alignment from top to bottom is correct, and that looks okay. Now my sizes here are incorrect, so again I'm going to turn off my unwrap and jump back to my edit poly. Make sure I turn vertex mode on. Now we're just going to have to be a bit careful because our verts are starting to get a bit close together, so I want those. Hold down the shift key and I want these. And I want to pull that down to match the frame in the background. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So those and those. And I'm going to pull them up. And I'm going to just check the ones on the side as well. So I'm going to select those verts and those verts. Just checking where they actually are. Let me just turn that off for a minute. that should be okay for us actually. Let's turn our unwrap back on and jump back up. And again, we're going to turn off map seams and peel seams because I really hate those green lines that it puts around everything. It does that so you can easily see where your seams are on your UVs, but I don't need to see them. So, and again, we'll make our viewport a bit bigger here. Make sure we turn on our texture in the background so we can see what we're working with. Again, make sure we turn on whole object here so we can select everything at once. Let's just move that down. Let's scale it down. Now I am holding down the shift key here. Alright, let's position our UVs a little bit better. Just going to pull that up a bit bigger so I've got a bit more room to work with. Again, I'm holding down the shift key and I'm scaling it in one direction. And again, I'm holding down the shift key still and scaling it up. Don't do that. Remember to release the shift key, because if you scale in one direction and don't release the shift key before you start scaling in another direction, Max will try and scale in all directions. So shift key, scale one direction, release shift key, scale another direction. Again, let's just move that over a little bit. Thank you for the host, Kiori. I was watching you yesterday while you were streaming for a little while. I think it was yesterday. It was either yesterday or Sunday. No, I think it was yesterday. Thank you for the host, Kiori. Hope you're well. Let's have a look here. Again, let's turn off whole object mode, go into vertex mode. Select our verts through there. Hold down the control key and select our verts through here. Make sure we're in move mode. And I'm just going to move them down. Again, I'm holding down the shift key to constrain these in one direction. Let's do the same thing for the bottom. So hold down the control, select those verts, hold down the shift key to constrain it and pull it up. Just trying to see where that is. I think it's around there. Let's look at the ones on the inside edge now. So again, control key to select those verts and shift key and move them in just a little bit. Okay, and let's check our color on the sides here. So I'm just going to close that for a moment. Jump back into my orthographic viewport. Now you see our colors are not really matching here. They're matching on the top and the bottom, but the sides here, that's too light because it's copying the color from up here. So we're just going to have to swap that out a bit. So we'll open our UVs again. Let's find where they are. So I'm going to select that and find it in my UVs. It's these tall ones here. So the easiest way for us to find a good spot here on the texture will be, I think, this section through here. That part of the texture in there is a good match for that color and has no other part of the texture. It's a very plain piece of wood, so that will probably be a good spot for us to use. So again, I'm going to select that. I'm going to scale it. I'm holding down the shift key here. I don't want to scale in width, I only want to scale in height. Because again, if I scale in width, I'm going to get stretching happening on my texture. But I do have to make sure it's not too wide that it starts to overflow into that part of the texture there. So again, I'm holding down the shift key and I am scaling in width here just a bit and down in height just a bit. Let's just deselect that, and now you see our colours match a lot better. So let's grab this piece here, which is the opposite side. And again, I'm going to scale it down in the height. I'm actually going to place it over this one just so I can get them relatively the same size. But again, I don't want to overlap my UVs, because if I do want to paint up anything in Mari, I don't want my UVs overlapping, so I'm just going to move that one to this side here. Now, you'll notice here, my texture is actually, this column is wider at the bottom than at the top. So what's happening is part of my UVs are starting to overlay on this part of the texture here, which I don't want. So I'm going to move it way over here to this side. Should be good, just about there. Okay, let's close down our UVW and have a look here. And that's a lot better. It matches the texture a lot better. Now, I may do the same thing, I think, with the insides here. I think that texture is just a bit too light for the wood that it's next to. So I'm just going to move those down as well. And I think that's the top, that's the bottom, which will make these the sides. Let's work with the sides to begin with. Now again, these sides are much smaller than the width, so we can afford to shrink this down quite a bit. Now I'm going to have the same problem here. I don't want to overlap my UVs, so I can't really put them here. But this part of the texture is using this column, which is wider at the bottom, so we're going to get a bit of overflow. We can either scale that in to make it a bit smaller, or we can just rotate that texture UV a little bit, which is what I'm going to do here. So it's not completely straight, but it better matches. It doesn't overlap that column in the background. Okay, let's do the same for this one. In fact, what I'm going to do here too is I'm going to move that one up. Scale this one down. Get it about the same size so our UVs look consistent. We'll move that one down here, and we're going to have to rotate it around just a little bit as well. Alright. And then again, that fixes that problem, makes the texture color match much better. But we have these top pieces here to do as well. So, and they're going to be these ones up here. You'll notice that I have part of my UV shell outside of the 0 to 1 space. That's not going to be good. We're going to move those in for all those pieces. We'll do that in just a sec.